CTBK is more than just a full-service accounting firm. They are one team with an innovative approach to accounting and rise to each new challenge with collaborative problem-solving skills. CTBK goes above and beyond by lending helping hands in the Buffalo and Niagara communities through volunteer work and donations, and is partnered up with Victory Sports for 2022 to help keep kids in the community active. The professionals at CTBK are determined to help individuals and businesses succeed. Whether a large corporation, a small business, or somewhere in between, call CTBK at 716-630-2400 and see what CTBK's one-team approach can do for you. Welcome to another edition of Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. I'm Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with Jonah Bronstein of the New Bronstein Times. And as you could see, you may be confused as to which panel to look at. We have the Jonah Bronstein lookalike, Eric Wood, joining us. Eric, the former Buffalo Bills captain and center. I always like to say captain first, because you also were a guard. But I always like to say captain and center first. I'm guessing that was a source of pride for you, right, Eric?
It definitely was. And for me personally, I mean, I wasn't even a captain on my high school football team. So to be a captain of an NFL football team, like, that meant a lot to me. And as an offensive lineman, there's only so many like taglines you can possibly get. And you know what? Being voted captain when it's voted on by your teammates and coaches, like, that means a lot to you. There's, I made one Pro Bowl and that tagline gets tagged all the time, but there's some politics and whatever else in being a Pro Bowler. Being a captain of a football team, especially when you're an offensive lineman and not a quarterback, is genuinely something you purely earned. And I'm not taking a shot at any Bills players. I've just seen around the league that, maybe, a player comes to a team, or you make a rookie a captain because he's a quarterback and you want him to be the leader of the team.
Right.
And those stars look good on the patch on the jersey, right?
And you know what? They do. And it still irks me. Like, I absolutely love Rex Ryan, love talking to him and catching up with him still. But we had game captains. I should have the gold patch. I was a captain for the years prior to him.
I think 3 years prior and all the years after.
2 years prior and one after. So I graduated the NFL with 3 stars, but it should have been that solid gold one. And nowadays, the Walter Payton Men of the Year nominees get the big, or I guess maybe it's just the winners get the emblem on their jersey.
Winners.
Like, that would have been cool too, but it's all good.
There's no grudges being held or short memory on all this stuff. Eric is joining us to talk about his book, which came out on October 12th, and it's called Tackle What's Next: Own Your Story, Stack Wins, Achieve Your Goals in Business and Life. It is available at, wherever books are sold, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, you name it. When I Googled it a few days ago, one of the top things was Target comes back. Did you ever think that your products would be for sale at a Target when you were growing up in suburban Cincinnati?
No, I didn't. And I don't know what I would have assumed would have been for sale either. I don't know that it would have been a book. I wasn't into reading much until maybe about midway through my NFL career, when then you're not ever forced to read anything. Like in college, when you're forced to read something, or in high school or growing up, it was to do everything you could but read the book, but still pass the test or get a good grade on the test. And then I found some things I was interested in, a lot of it personal development writing, hence being why I chose to write a book with personal development nature to it. But no, I wouldn't have envisioned that.
I don't want to give away the book because I want people to buy the book, but I know that a big part of the inspiration for your post-retirement career was how you retired, why you retired. Is there a message to give in terms of turning such heartbreak into inspiration to launch you through the next phase of your career? And I guess on a slightly different note, allow you to lose a lot of weight.
Well, let's start off like this. One, the story of my career ending is detailed in the book, but we really could have just referenced the article that you wrote when you drove to Louisville yourself, which I still will never forget. And I appreciate you chronicling that and kind of taking this time of obscurity for me when I was out of the spotlight completely and really couldn't even comment on what was going on at the time because of how that would impact contract and money and everything else. And so I do appreciate the article that you came to Louisville to make sure that it was written exactly right. That meant a lot to me. And maybe we should have just used that for that kind of first chapter of the book, talking about the pivot point of my career. But that being said,
I really miss the Kingfish hush puppies. That's really the reason I went. It had been several years since I'd eaten at Kingfish, and that was the real reason.
Yeah, I respect
you
that.
Just happen to live in the area.
That's fine. Well, I still appreciate it. You still took the time to do it.
I did.
No, but that being said,
I should have told you about my drive back because there was an accident on, I'm sorry, the interstate, is it 65 that goes through Kentucky mostly to up to Cincinnati? And GPS took me through, I don't need to tell you, the freaking hills. And I wore the hell out of my brakes and my steering column. And anyways, but driving through the Kentucky hills was an experience.
I guarantee it. Now you sound like my mom and stepdad talking about the traffic every time they leave here. I'm like, I never have the issue when I'm driving up to Cincinnati, but every time you guys do, I never hear the end of it. That being said, back to the book for a second. The way my career ended, I had just signed a contract extension before the previous season. I had no intentions of retiring anytime soon. I love professional football and really the direction of the Bills. And so I re-signed with the Bills. There's really no way I would have retired at any point of this Josh Allen era so far, maybe if my body completely shut down on me, but I'm such an eternal optimist that every year would have been another Super Bowl year. So how am I going to walk away now? We're going to win the Super Bowl next year. And so that being said, I plan on still being a part of the Bills to this day. I was extended to be whatever quarterback we drafted in the first rounds, mentor, center, veteran center in the middle. And so I really had no plan of transition outside of football. I got very fortunate that guys like yourself and many other media members reached out and said, hey, anything I can ever do for you, please let me know. And so I transitioned into media, also started a podcast where I started picking people's brains and how you transition successfully in life. And that's not necessarily to say that I'm trying to out-earn financially my playing career. It's finding success in that next chapter of life. I feel like so many people, because of COVID or a loss of a loved one or a change of identity out there, are at a transition point in life, or you will be at a transition point in life. And this book can serve you. And the transition point also doesn't have to be some big life altering event. It can simply just being what I like to say, making your next chapter in life better than your current one and being intentional about it.
Staring at you, Jonah.
I actually thought your camera froze because you weren't changing your facial expression.
I was waiting for you to ask a follow-up question.
Well, I did want to ask Eric about writing the process of writing the book and also the process of getting Sean McDermott to write the foreword. How did that come about? What do you think about what he wrote for you in this book?
So it was a long process. I feel like if I did another book, I could do it in about 6 months. This one took me about 18 months. A lot of editing. It just took a while to outline it, get all the stories with the podcast guest snippets or mentors or whoever may be that poured into each and every chapter. Took a while to compile. I think I could do it a lot quicker the next time, but that's like anything in life. You learn as you go. As far as Sean McDermott in the foreword, honestly, he blew me away with his words. I didn't know exactly how Sean would receive doing a forward. To my knowledge, he's never done anything like that before. And so for him to be willing to do it meant a lot to me, and to put the time and attention to detail does not surprise me. If he's going to commit to something, you guys know Sean McDermott well enough at this point. He's all in on no matter what he does, whether that's coaching or it's writing a foreword for a radio analyst who's now writing a book. But it meant a lot to me, the words that he said in the book. Yes, it helps that Sean McDermott's the head coach of the Bills, one of the most popular teams in the NFL, who is very popular to much of the audience that will be buying this book. That's part of the reason I asked Sean. The main reason I asked Sean is a lot of the leadership principles that I saw in Sean are things that I wanted to emulate in my next chapter of life. And I learned from him. We stayed in contact and we talk most weeks for the pregame show, and whether it's 20 minutes before or after, if he's ever late for the media on a Friday, you guys can blame me because I'm right before you guys. But that being said, the way he's poured into me over the years, it meant a lot to me that he took the time to do the forward.
And Sean's a bit of a reader, especially of books maybe similar to the theme of this book, self-help type, Stoic philosophy type literature.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The first time I ever walked into Sean McDermott's office, he had a John Gordon book behind him, and I had read the same one, and I started looking along the shelf, and a lot of the books I had read as well that were on the shelf behind him. John Gordon wrote an endorsement for this book. He's become a friend of mine. He connected me with the publishing company. A lot of full circle moments when writing this book. But yes, Sean also is familiar with the space that I was writing the book as well, so I was very comfortable that he would know what I was kind of looking for in the forward.
And now that we know that he's such a good writer, maybe we can have him give written statements at the press conferences instead of some of the non-statements we give when we ask.
No. Don't give him any ideas, because he'll do that. And then we won't get to ask him any questions. He'll just say, these were the things that I wanted to say. And I'm going to imagine you would have asked me about this. Here you go. Here's a pool report. You guys can just use these quotes, and then we'll never hear from him again.
That's probably safe. And I will say this, and I'll ask you guys both this. Okay, so he doesn't give you guys a ton, but at times he's a little bit more jovial and whatnot. But I always feel like, and maybe you can say differently, but the way he addresses people by their first names and at least acknowledges you, does that make you feel a little warm and bubbly inside? Or is it simply like he's doing that so that you don't get on him about the lack of answer?
It's a technique. And I think that both he and Brandon Beane have been coached to do that by Derek Boyko, the head of media relations or communications with the Bills. You notice that they both do it. I don't think that's an accident. I think that it's a disarming kind of mechanism. But I'll tell you who does not like that are the electronic media, because when they want to use a quote from Sean McDermott or Brandon Beane, it's got the other person's name in it. And they don't like you acknowledging maybe the competition or stopping your, it ruins the quote for the broadcast. We can just take it out when we're running, but I also do notice that there are some people in the local broadcast media that kind of get off on it and make sure that they use that quote. So if you ask the question, he's, I'm sorry, for lack of a better phrase. I know you're a religious man, but he's fluffing the person who's asking the question, so that way you can then use that answer right there in your sportscast, and you can probably feel like, the coach acknowledges me.
Yeah.
So there's I guess a little bit of it, but I view it as he's working me a little bit.
Yeah. And I could see that, but I do feel like, especially when it's someone newer to the media, like at least he took the time to know, like someone, especially someone new's name. And,
yes.
And I don't know. I see it from a sense because I know, and you guys know too, what all they have going on prior to that. A lot of it's rinse and repeat. I catch Sean on the pregame interview that we record for Sunday, right after he's on with WGR and right before he's going in with you guys. And he's answering the questions oftentimes, even just that day for the third time in a row, much less what other national media he has. Like, at least he's saying someone's name, but I was interested to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah. I also like this part too, though. I guess I have my answers all over the place. I can see both sides of it. I think it works. I think it's effective in general, but there's also the way that you could use it to make sure that the people out there who are listening, whether it be a live news conference or something like that, if they don't like the question, it's actually kind of making sure that everybody out there knows who asked it.
Right. Like when Jay Skursky kept asking him about the punter the one week, and he's like,
yes,
Jay, yes, I wish I had a better answer for you, Jay.
Poor Jay. I got one of those from Brandon Beane at the news conference in the facility. I got a very stern Tim as I asked a question about what the team knew and when they knew it or whatever. So, and I, made sure I kept eye contact and nodded my head and, didn't go, curl up into a fetal position. let's stay on this topic for a little bit, Eric, because it has been a big part of your journey from the NFL to broadcaster. And you've also done it on the national level, doing college games. I know you're not doing that anymore, but what have you learned about the media that maybe you wish you knew while you were still playing, or that somebody could have come in and held a seminar or something and taught you a thing or two?
Man, that's a great question. I can think back to like little tiny things that I've learned over the years. I did sidelines. I was a field analyst, not a sideline reporter for ESPN. Apparently there's a distinction, but to some directors, there's not a distinction. My mic was supposed to be open, but there were weeks that it was not open during the game. I remember doing my first post-game interview. This is pre-COVID. You could put your arm around the coach. Dave Dorn, I had known for a little while, I guess. And I put my arm around him. He's excited. He put his arm around me after the game. We're facing the camera, and I asked him a few questions. Felt like it went really well as it could for my first ever post-game interview. And the director said, "Hey, Eric, next time, no big deal. We never even told you, but face the coach to the camera, not yourself. We will put you in the shot if we want you in there." And it's just like, I've learned so many little nuances like that, learning the broadcast that you learn from experience over time. Broadcast media is a lot of work, honestly, especially when you're doing 2 games a weekend like I was for a while, trying to learn those rosters. The Bills gig is more fun to me than it is work, especially once you learn the team. And I'm familiar with so many guys in the NFL, but advice that I would give to someone, and I actually got this advice as well, was don't think you could just take your playing experience to the booth or to a studio appearance and think that's going to work, because you'll make a fool of yourself. Like, be research. Don't be when I played, this was our mindset. Well, you gave them nothing. Like, there's times where that's warranted, but I do a round table every week with Sal and Chris Brown before the games. And I will purposely avoid any of their things that they've written or put out throughout the week up until that point, or at least the previous day or two, so that I'm trying to find information that they might not have. And if they do have it, that's fine, but I'm not reading their stuff. Like, I want to bring something to the table where they're like, wow, where'd you pick that up, Eric? And so that being said, it's a lot of work. I knew it would be. We wrote that. I say we wrote it. We worked together on the athletic column that year. And, I've gotten.
You wrote it.
Yeah, I've gotten to see like the different elements of each piece of it, and they all have different nuances. I will say this. Here's one thing I've learned. I cannot imagine being the radio analyst for the Bills during the playoff drought, like, especially kind of some of the middle of it. Like, it's easy. We sound good every week because the Bills are so good. And even when they lose, there's so much hope. I can't imagine calling meaningless games from week 15 on every week. And so
here's another thing, just Eric, regarding that too. You are going to be, when this current generation that's really in the wheelhouse of, tailgating and all, let's say from my son's age, he's in high school, to 30 or whatever, your voice is going to be revered regardless of how good you were. And people are going to think back. It was like, remember when Eric Wood was the color analyst? Man, he was freaking awesome. And people are just going to remember that because the Bills made them happy. You make them happy you're the conduit to make them happy.
Yeah. And I'll say this, as far as a broadcast goes, as an analyst, you're at the mercy of the play-by-play guy. If he stinks, or if he's not confident, or if he knows the point that's going to be really good on air and he steals it every time, you're not going to be very good as an analyst. John Murphy knows what is going to be best to be said and just tease me up for it. Now, John's not coaching, or he's not auditioning for his next role. He's got his dream job at this point. And so he can let me be successful and just, I give him the credit in something like this, but everyone would say, man, that's a really good point that Eric made. But Murph, in the TV timeout, we're talking, hey, let's talk about that last third down, what the defense did. Like, Murph could tell you, he knows football well enough, but he lets me do it. And so to answer your question, I wish I had like one solid thing that like, wow, this blew my mind. Other than maybe the fact that it would not be very fun to cover one team that was not good.
You mentioned the difficulties of maybe broadcasting.
I just want
during the
to,
drought.
Jonah, I'm sorry.
Go
I just
ahead.
want to mention this one thing because it comes up in conversation with Eric and I a lot, especially when we are on doing a show together. And I know that Jonah's been there. We always talk about the headline that I wrote. And there's the excuse that you could always give is that the writers don't write the headlines. But when I was at ESPN, I wrote my headlines and it torqued Eric for a long time.
Couple
and
months.
I will say for years, I think after a while you begin to tolerate it, and I will show it. It's not, maybe I'll be able to bring it up here when we get to the next question, and then I'll actually be able to phrase it, but it had something to do. You got into a fight with Aaron Maben, I think it was, or somebody.
No, this was later. It was Brian Johnson, I think.
Brian Johnson. Okay. See, so you remember it better than I do. And I said something about murderous rage, and Eric, I think, took it literally. I was trying to have fun with it. And that is what comes out of covering a team that doesn't win. It's
right.
Like, I gotta have fun with this or have something interesting. And I think Eric was like, I did not want to kill the man.
Right.
And it turned into a thing. And
honestly, it wasn't the murderous rage as much as it was the quote that was like asterisked out, like, I'm going to effing kill you.
Oh,
like, I think that I was more worried about that.
I
like,
see. Getting back to mom and dad. Yeah. Maybe exactly. You don't want your,
I go back to
your
my
aunts
locker,
and
I have all these texts, and then I go to these hospital visits, and that's the only thing they want to talk about. And it's,
geez.
And look, you said earlier, I'm a religious person. I am a spiritual man. I'm a man of faith, but I am the furthest thing from perfect you could ever meet. And you correctly quoted me there. And there were times where you would have struggled to mic me up for a Bills game. There was enough F-bombs. But that being said, I just didn't want it in print.
I'm going to try to find it here. And just so that way I can throw myself on your mercy for one final time here. But maybe that was also like how the sausage gets made type thing about the media. Sometimes we're desperate to share something interesting.
And the funny thing is, the only reason you knew I was upset about it was because I just started being short with you, and someone brought it up one time, and I was like, well, I just feel like I treated you guys really well for a long time. And then, I drop an F-bomb on a football field, or I'm in a murderous rage, and now the headlines are completely turned against me. And I'm like, look, I just try to be really respectful for you guys. I understand that your job is not very fun covering us all the time. I just felt like we had a better relationship than that. And that's where I'm at right now.
Understood.
It's funny, like, you got to be really careful about your relationship with the media, but like, I mean, how smart would it be for like an offensive lineman to say, like, after the season, everything's, a couple days, if you're hanging around in Buffalo after the season, like, hey, do y'all want to go grab a beer? I'd like to just like get to know you guys a little bit off the record completely. Like, probably would go a long way to
absolutely
making sure that everything was in your favor. And, the media controls so much, and no fan opinion and all of that doesn't get you on a team. It doesn't make you a Pro Bowl, but it can make you a little bit harder to cut when everyone loves you.
That's true. And I think it makes you get a longer runway. And I think that you got that. Maybe not in that instance. I was with the Buffalo News at the time when I wasn't at ESPN. I was writing it for a blog, but I'm getting closer to finding it. You get a longer runway, a Lorenzo Alexander who stood up after every loss, Kyle Williams, those guys. I mean, you get this built into you. And I don't think it's a tactic for them. Like, I don't think it's they weren't trying to work us, to use the phrase that I used earlier. It's the fans. It's not just the media treating you that way. The fans over time see that this is a stand-up guy, literally, after a game, that he's not going to hide like a LaShawn McCoy did, or, I guess there's other guys I could name, or Chris Kelsey, like there are people who maybe weren't superstars, but the fans respected because they took the bullets. And I just want to mention the one. Here's where we were worked one time. I wasn't a part of it, but it's a famous story that John Worrow likes to tell. That Doug Marrone came into the media room one day and said, "Hey guys, let's all go over to the Big Tree and have a beer." And they all ordered, some chicken fingers or whatever, and they sat down at the bar at the Big Tree. And across the ticker, Bills trade Sammy Watkins. Now, he had to have known that the Bills were trading Sammy Watkins. And he tried to play it off as, I'm being a nice guy. And then when the trade happened, half of them had to get up and leave and go work and leave their beer and their wings that they just ordered. And he was like, "Oh, I didn't know anything about it." So
wow.
that's the other side of it.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite Marrone stories.
Wasn't Sammy,
he was always trying to work us.
Was Sammy traded by Marrone or was that McDermott?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Stevie Johnson trade.
Gotcha.
Not Sam. Gotcha. Stevie Johnson trade. I'm sorry. Gotcha. I'm getting all kinds of things haywire here. Jonah, I'm sorry. I did cut you off.
Not only did you cut me off, but you asked my question. But I did want to go ahead, Eric.
Well, real quick, I was just going to say one thing I've had to navigate is like people are like, is it hard to not be negative or to give negative criticism of a current player or maybe a friend of yours? I'm like, well, I'm not like ever personally attacking anybody. If someone jumps off sides, I'm not going to say, look at that idiot out there. I'm going to say, man, that's a really crucial situation to make a penalty like that. That makes this third and 2 becomes really difficult now at 3rd and 7. That's not a personal attack on somebody. But one thing that was difficult with me early on, and I think people understand me now, like I'm never going to break a story. If you tell me something at dinner the night before a game or a couple days before the game or after a game, I will never break that story. And it took me a while where people would be like, is this Eric, the media person, or are you just here as a buddy? It took them a while to understand that, like, you can trust me. You can talk to me like you always have, and I'm never going to break the story. And even talking to like coaches that I had, I'll tell them like, look, before a preseason game, if we're cutting up, if you talk really good about a player, I might say, Chad Hall thinks Isaiah Hodgins is having a very good training camp, which happened this year. But if Chad said, hey, this guy's really struggling, I would never say that on air. I would never say, well, Chad Hall said this guy was really struggling out there. Like that would be breaking trust. And so that's something that like I hate's an issue, but I'll have to preface some conversations like, look, like I'll never repeat any of this. Like, let's have some fun.
Right. I'm curious to know, and I guess maybe I would have asked you this if we were able to connect, but when you were doing your fundraisers that week is when I reached out to ask you about the 6-3 game, which I wrote about a couple of weeks ago as one of the worst pieces of football ever played. So if you were calling that game and the Buffalo Bills commit their 9th false start of the game
at home,
what would you then, would you have also just mentioned that as unfortunate?
You know what I honestly would have done? Because assuming the parabolic mics were as good as they are now, I would be trying to figure out like what is going on. For that many false starts, like are they mixing up the cadence too bad because they have a really good pass rusher and now you're confusing the offense? Is it a timing issue with the
at home, no less?
Yeah. So is it, was Trent Edwards out of rhythm that game to where, green 80, so that, or green 80. Okay, now Trent wants to let the defense come down and see what they're doing, and then he holds the count. We jump off sides when he never should have held it. And so I would be trying to analyze that based upon I would be trying to look for the why. Why are they jumping off sides? Are they afraid of Sean Rogers, who was playing nose guard for them, and they're flinching at him? Are they worried about speed off the edge, or is it blitzers, or is it the quarterback, or is it really unintelligent offensive linemen?
Every offensive lineman and Kirk Chambers, who came in late in the third quarter, had a penalty. However, Eric Woods was declined. So you were the only one not dinged in the game. You committed a penalty, but you didn't give up any yards. I found the story. Let's go down memory lane here. The headline in the Buffalo News on August 20, 2014 says, Bills training camp melee sends Eric Wood into murderous rage. By Tim Graham. I'm owning this. Buffalo Bills center Eric Wood's helmet had been ripped off and a couple of punches delivered into his face. A full-scale brawl erupted, and in the mass of bodies, Wood screamed he would murder the rookie who did it. Toward the end of this morning's practice at St. John Fisher College, undrafted rookie defensive end Brian Johnson locked up with Wood after a goal line drill. Running back Fred Jackson had slithered into the end zone. The play was over, but the battle was not. Before the fight could be broken up, tight end Scott Chandler had taken Johnson to the ground. Chandler's helmet also was torn off. An incensed Wood marched toward Johnson and yelled, "I'll effing kill you." All right. For the record.
Yeah. I mean, the murder.
I think that's well written. It's well written by a veteran boxing reporter, by the way. 21 days in pads and counting. Bills defensive end Jerry Hughes bellowed with glee. I love it. That's what happens, baby. Bills coach Doug Marrone wasn't amused. It's not part of the game, Doug Marrone said. Sorry.
Doug was not a fan of my temper, which I actually give Doug Marrone credit in the book for taking some of my temper out of my game, which needed to go. It did. And he's told me early on, he said, if you're going to be a captain of this team, the helmet throwing, the fighting every practice, like that's got to end now because you're a leader. And we see you that way. But I was not a captain yet to that point in my career, I don't think. And so he spoke some words of wisdom into me. You know, say what you want about Doug as a coach and our record and him quitting and ended up down in Jacksonville and all that. But that impacted my career and my trajectory.
He was, I think, yeah, I'm only about to say things that have been said to me about Doug Marrone, because as a reporter, that's the best I can do. I'm not in those meeting rooms. I mean, I have my opinions about my personal interactions with Doug Marrone. I found him to be a phony. I found him to be full of bluster. But as a coach, he apparently had some value. I mean, he's been wanted. He was a hot ticket, although I think some of that has to do with who your agent is in the various hiring cycles. But I just recall when Doug Marrone started to become a big thing. I'd been an NFL reporter for probably 10 years at that point, and I'm thinking, well, how come I've never heard of this guy? But he was all of a sudden, people were fighting over him to be their next head coach. I mean,
yeah, it was pretty wild. You know, you go 8-4 at Syracuse, and now you're the head coach of an NFL organization. Just kind of wild to me that, you know, and there was a lot of, you know, he signed a smart contract, not knowing what the ownership situation was. That's probably part of the reason it was not as heavily sought after to take that job in Buffalo, considering there's only 32 NFL jobs. You know, you could say what you want about our organization at the time. That's a lifelong goal for so many coaches in the industry. But when there's unrest in the organization and you have an owner that's on his deathbed, then that can be a slippery situation quick. You know, I have no idea how this is all going to shake out. I'm going to move my family and 20 other families on staff to a city. The owner could pass. Someone else comes in and fire us all immediately. That's not something everyone's willing to sign up for. Doug took a chance. And I just know when you leave, it's been proven time and time again. When you think you're getting over on one NFL organization, the rest of them buy in, they band together pretty quickly.
Right. I'm surprised he got another shot to be a head coach. Did he quit on the Bills?
To my knowledge.
Meaning, not to your feeling, because technically he exercised a clause in his contract. You know, he legally left. He didn't but did he quit? The Q word. I mean, everything that goes in with the word of.
No, I'll say this. I don't think he thought he was quitting on the Bills. I think he thought he was leaving for his hometown team of the Jets.
The Jets job, which blew up in his face and the media. And
that's where I'm saying, if you think you're getting over on one organization, if you don't think there was a call around saying, hey, you can't let him do that to the Bills and then take that job. Mr. Wilson's been one of the instrumental parts of this league for so long. You can't let them do that to the Bills.
Right.
But that's without any insider info. I'm just assuming that's what happened because it seemed like he was right in line to take that job. And we missed the playoffs by a game both years, we were close.
Right. Who is the Buffalo Bills' best offensive lineman to this point, Eric?
Deion's got the hardest job and he plays at a high level. Mitch Morse has looked outstanding to me when he's been in there. So either one of them.
And who is it a tricky position for me to ask you who's been a disappointment?
No,
or if anybody has been.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. Roger Saffold struggled in pass protection this year, but he missed so much of training camp, new organization, a team that throws the ball all the time, and teams know it's a pass most of the time. That could be a tough situation, but I wouldn't call him a disappointment. Ryan Bates could be in the exact same category. It's tough to pass protect at guard when the defensive line knows it's a pass almost every single play. And the same could be said about the right tackle position between Spencer Brown and Quessenberry. At times they've struggled in pass protection. But also, I believe when we could talk about who's disappointed along the offensive line, but I believe in Josh Allen's dropbacks this year, he has the least amount of pressure percentage coming from the 5 offensive linemen, not counting blitzes.
Right.
And can you say anything about the team is disappointing with the start that they've had, except for maybe, the second half in Miami and some of the hydration issues that led to that loss?
Man, it's tough to find things to complain about this Bills team. You can complain all you want about the run game with the running backs, but it's really hard in the NFL to be really good at the run and really good at the pass. It takes a lot of continuity. It takes a dedication to the run game for that run game to really show up in the fourth quarter. And that's not how you score consistently over 30 points every week like the Bills do. The injuries are disappointing, but it's not necessarily something that could have been prevented to start the season. Defensively, they're so good. I mean, I don't know what necessarily would be disappointing. You could say, well, they gave up 300 yards to Pickett and Mahomes back to back, and you win both of those games. Like, I don't know. It's hard to find egregious things with this Bills team. Right now you're in the position just kind of looking at luxuries. Like, can we get more explosive at punt returns? Can we make up some yards there? I don't know. Maybe an emerging number 3 receiver. We all assumed to be Dawson Knox, who took over kind of Cole Beasley's catches. His production hasn't quite been there. McKenzie's had some inconsistency. Everyone loves Shakir, but is he ready to step into that number 3 role? I don't know that Hodgins is quite explosive enough to really want to put him out there all the time at this point. You're really cherry picking here.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the Bills' strengths are obvious, but their lack of weaknesses is probably a big part of why they're so good this season.
Yeah, and man, their in-game adjustments have been great too. I mean, you talk about giving up 17 total points in the second half of this entire season. 10 of those come at Kansas City. And I really love the resilience of the Bills in that Kansas City game. You start off the game and you score 3 points, but you're marching up and down the field. So Spagnuolo says, screw it. I'm just going to bring the house. What do I have to lose? Well, the Bills are still calling plays that they think they can check, but now no one can hear at the line of scrimmage. Now you're snapping the ball at the end of the play clock every time. And Josh Allen goes 0 for 7 on his next 7 throws. And they make a couple adjustments and he goes 13 for 13 on his next 13 throws. Like, to me, that's good football. And that's what winning teams do. And you call it winning ugly, but man, when you beat the second best team in the NFL at their place, feels pretty good afterwards.
Would you have expected a bigger drop off in the secondary with Micah Hyde out than what we've seen?
Yeah, I would have. That's a credit to the pass rush. That's a credit to everyone else on defense, maybe the scheme as well. But yeah, I mean, when you're talking about Micah Hyde being out, but not necessarily saying, okay, now you have Tre'Davious White who can lock down one side of the field. You can kind of help. It's like offensive linemen. It's real easy to cover up one inexperienced guy or, one guy that's struggling. But if you have a few of them, Now it's time to get exposed. It's been impressive to me. I would have just assumed it would have been Jaquan Johnson. I would have assumed 4 years in the system. He's been quick to be the fill-in guy, and he would always fill in for Micah Hyde. Well, when they had Poyer come back, they had DeMar Hamlin come in, and I like how they use DeMar Hamlin. Like, they bring him on blitzes a lot more. They're more aggressive with him, and you're never going to get like a real answer of what the differentiator is there. But I would love to hear Leslie Frazier say, this is exactly why we trust DeMar Hamlin to be in there. Is it Jaquan's so good on special teams, we want him to be there, and we want him to back up both spots? Because I would just love to hear the perfect explanation from him.
Sounds like a good question for Friday.
Murph's doing the interview this week.
Oh, well, send him a note.
Will do.
Last question from me here, Eric, unless you want to talk about how many times you've been confused for Jonah Bronstein while out in public. Because it happens to me when I'm with Jonah, people will make the reference. I've never seen him sign an Eric Wood autograph. I don't think he takes it that far.
Dude, you should. You absolutely should. And the hair is perfect. I might need to like get the sides shorter like you're rocking.
The mullet?
Let me see the side. Oh, yeah, it's beautiful.
What did we learn about the Bills this past weekend by watching the rest of the league?
You can take for granted how good they are quickly. You watch it each and every week. We've seen it the last couple of years. You can really take for granted how good they are. And, Josh is still top 5 in so many statistical categories with everyone playing an extra game on him. But I think you could take for granted that, the NFC is so hard to figure out this year. Like, who's good, who's bad. San Francisco looks so good, and they're 3-4. And are they that much worse, or where do they stack up against the Giants? To me, that's the NFC figuring that out. Like, putting together an NFC power rankings right now would be really difficult for me to do. The AFC seems pretty top heavy with the Bills and Kansas City.
The Bills have already beaten the best team in every other division.
Wow.
Which is impressive.
Man, what do you, would you have ever guessed that Packers at Bills would be an 11.5 point spread this week?
No. And and my picks don't count, but I think the Bills can win by 20. And I think my score reflects that for the Channel 4, the pregame predictions. I watched that Packers game, and I was not impressed even by Aaron Rodgers. And even you'd think with a Hall of Fame player like that, 2-time MVP or however many MVPs he's won, the last 2, you see a flash or a spark. And you did maybe on that last touchdown, the touchdown toss to Jones out of the backfield. And it's like, okay, that looked like the Packers, but that was one play out of 60. And they just don't have it. And again, those are dangerous teams sometimes, but that was a sexy matchup when that schedule came out. Sunday Night Football, Rodgers versus Allen. And now it seems like a bit of a clunker, but maybe that's to your point about taking these guys for granted. Don't, not necessarily take them for granted or just assume. Eric, I just wanted to mention you. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you can't take anybody lightly in the NFL. Everybody's good. This Bills team just seems so hungry. People talk about what they learned from that 13 seconds last year. I think they're just out to bury people this year. Like, if they get the opportunity, the foot doesn't come off the gas.
It does have a little, okay, so not quite yet. Maybe I will after a few more games, but I think the team that embodies that were the 2007 Patriots with Brady and Moss. And the game that I covered when I was with the Palm Beach Post down in Florida, Randy Moss going up for catches contested by 2, sometimes 3 guys, and not only catching the ball, but the defensive backs guarding him would be injured on the play. I mean, it was comical, like cartoonish dominance. And I'm maybe not there yet for the Bills, but and they do pull the plug a little bit. Josh Allen has given way late in games. Keenum, coming in and playing an entire quarter against Pittsburgh, for instance.
He played a quarter and a half against Tennessee.
Right, right. See, now Belichick wouldn't have done that. Brady's playing all 60 minutes, except for maybe the final series, and he sends out whoever the backup was to kneel it out.
Gotcha.
But the Patriots were big FU energy that year, and I think the Bills you're right, they're showing that. I just want to mention, and again, this is from your playing days, and I've always made it clear when talking to you that I have no idea what I'm looking at when it comes to offensive line play or defensive line play, which is why I always went to you for explanations and Kyle after the games. But it is reminiscent in reverse, watching these games on Sunday. I would go from the 1 o'clock games, because you guys always played at 1 o'clock on Sunday. I'd be working through the 4 o'clock games, and finally we'd get together for beers and watch as much of the Sunday night game as we could. Always a marquee matchup, or usually a marquee matchup. And I would week after week say, this is what it's supposed to look like. Now, I'm not talking about line play, but I'm talking about explosive plays, the talent, the skill positions. I'd say this is what, now it's the other way around. Now I'm getting that with covering the Bills games. And then when it comes time for me to watch whatever game is on prime time, I'm getting the friggin' Broncos and Colts or whatever. And I'm like, what is this I'm watching? It's a total flip.
I know. And I hate working primetime games. Like the Sunday at 1 games are so much fun to me. I have my routine I like on Sundays. And if it's on the road, I can get home that night, or if it's in Buffalo, I can still go watch Sunday Night Football at Elio DePaulo's and get dinner. Like, I like that schedule, but man, the primetime slate this year just feels awful. And I know, like, all teams have to get a Thursday night game, and you're going to get some bad matchups. It's just been unfortunate, some of the product that's been out there.
Yeah, and I think that it's making the Bills, how good the Bills are making it feel that much worse probably to us when you get to watch the Bills all the time and really absorb what they do. And by comparison, maybe if you live in Pittsburgh, the brand of football doesn't seem as off on prime time because your brand of football's shit too. But anyway, Eric Wood, he wrote a book, Tackle What's Next. Own your story, stack wins, achieve your goals in business and life. It is available wherever books are sold. It's been on the shelf for a couple of weeks now. And you're happy with it? You happy with the experience?
I am. I talked to a few others that wrote books and asked them if right before it released, if you thought it stunk, and they all said yes. Like, you're never going to read a book 5 times in a row through the editing process and all that. There's no cliffhangers because the story. This is a lot of my story and experiences, and supplemented from podcast guests and everything else. And so, and then over the period, or like, it's never going to feel complete and finished. And then it's just, you have to turn it in. And so, all that being said, it's been really well received. I've appreciated all the feedback people have given me. And I'm happy I got it done. And I don't know that there's another one coming down the line anytime soon, but if it happens, I'll know a lot more the next time around.
I'm a professional writer, and the idea of writing a book is intimidating to me. And some of it has to do with the fact that I have zero interest in writing during my free time because that's what I do for work. So there's part of that, but also just the grueling aspect of how long it's going to take. Like you say, 18 months. The idea of getting started on something that you're not going to see a finished product for a year and a half is pretty daunting.
I could definitely see that, especially with you constantly turning things in. But kind of my point about feeling like it stinks, it's like, you may feel that way right before you submit, but you got another opportunity to go at it. Your next best piece is always coming down the line. Like, there's no new piece coming for me in a week.
That's true.
Like, if this stinks, it's over.
It's very permanent when it can be on a shelf, as it is over your right shoulder right now. There's a permanence there.
And that's where when there was times where I may have felt like I could go outside my values and tell a story that would, get some more purchases or whatever it be. It's like, okay, well, regardless, hopefully one day my grandkids and great grandkids read this, and I don't need anything outside of our kind of guardrails in there.
You didn't have to get to a point where you asked a former teammate or coach, hey, is it okay if I tell this story?
Exactly. Never had to do that once.
Well, that's a shame.
That's better for podcast.
That's right. Jonah, anything else you want to talk to your doppelganger about before we sign off?
I would like Eric's insight on this. If when I do get mistaken for being Eric Wood around town in the hometown I've lived in for 40 years, and it's happening more and more often these days, should I be taking that as a compliment?
I hope so. I hope you do. If you don't, I would either suggest cutting the hair, maybe lose the beard at this point, now that I can finally grow one or a semblance of one.
It's tough for Jonah to cut the hair. And I'll say this, we haven't discussed it, but I think this is part of it. Strange women will come up to him and just run their fingers through his hair. Like they just want to check it out. And if I had that, I don't think I'd want to forfeit it.
That's part of it. Eric had the longer hair at points in his career. What I haven't figured out is if people are telling me I look like this media superstar trim and fit version of Eric Wood, or if I look like Eric when he was in the middle of his career, because that's two different doppelgangers.
I think you're probably closer to Eric's playing weight than Eric is.
How tall are you, Jonah?
5'11".
Yeah, you're closer to my weight now than my playing weight. I guarantee it. If you were 6'5",
thanks for this.
Then yes.
You're 6'5". You're 6'5". Okay, well,
I'm 6'4".
Maybe we would go by. Maybe we should talk BMI.
Right. We're going down a bad rabbit hole right now.
Eric, thanks for this. Jonah
pleasure.
and I are going to stick around through a break and talk a little Sabres and UB football. But we're going to cut you loose. You've done your job here. You've sold some books, hopefully, and we appreciate your time.
Yep, likewise. I owe you guys a beer. Come Buffalo here soon.
Oh, we should plug Eric's beer. I got to try it a couple of weeks ago, sample it. It's very good. Blonde ale.
Oh, is that available, or was that a temporary thing? Do you want to plug your beer?
Yeah, it's available at Resurgence. All the proceeds go to the Evan Wood Fund, which was formerly the Eric Wood Foundation. So all the proceeds go back to helping children and their families at Oshad Children's Hospital.
Fantastic. Well, Jonah, thanks for mentioning that. I was derelict in not bringing that up. How did the events go out at Resurgence?
It was unbelievable. The beer launch was great. It was fun connecting with people. And then Flights and Bites year after year just sets record-breaking numbers. And I'm not even a player on the team anymore, which blows me away, the fan support, the public support. But
do you think it might have something to do with Josh Allen being in attendance?
Yeah, but like last year, he was supposed to come and he couldn't because of COVID regulations and all that. And so we never promised any of that. Like Josh coming this year, no one was promised that any current players would be there. You know, they're just people.
They just love Eric Wood.
Well, they're just generous. I mean,
yeah,
I say this all the time at the events. I'm like, people in Buffalo, I feel like can be generous to a fault. Like you're like, no, please don't donate that much. And they're like, no, I want to. And I'm like, that means the world to me, but I don't want you to put yourself in a compromising position. And then I always say, if at the end of my life, someone says Eric Wood was generous to a fault, like that would be a great thing. That'd be a great thing to be known by. And so I'm literally blown away to tears at each and every event when I see everyone that comes out. And each year we kind of limit the numbers that can come. We've moved to smaller venues and it still raises more money because people are so stinking generous.
I will say
I'm
that
happy for you.
Sold out when Tyrod Taylor was the quarterback, so I don't think it has all that much to do with Josh Allen.
That's true. I attended those events. I couldn't make it this year because it was sold out. I waited too long to buy a ticket, and I didn't know anybody there to get me in the back door.
Well, we'll work on it for next year.
Eric, thanks for this. Congratulations
on
the book also, and good luck with sales, and we'll see you at the stadium.
Yep. Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
CTBK is more than just a full-service accounting firm. They are one team with an innovative approach that takes on each new challenge with collaborative problem-solving skills to provide creative solutions for their clients. Based right here in Western New York, CTBK is a champion for your business in our community. Additionally, CTBK goes beyond tax and attest services by offering a wide array of consulting and outsourced solutions tailored to meet the unique needs of your business, allowing you to focus on your operational and long-term strategic goals. Whether you're a large corporation, a small business, or somewhere in between, the team at CTBK is determined to help you succeed. Visit ctbk.com or call 716-630-2400. 716-630-2400 to learn how CTBK's one-team approach can work for you. Welcome back to Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. Jonah Bronstein. The Buffalo Sabres continue to win. Since our last podcast, they chalked up another one, 5-1, a no-doubter at Vancouver. Now, Vancouver looked pretty awful, but still, for the Sabres to go on this West Coast trip and sweep it so far, they can, that's the Western Canada swing. Now they're down in Seattle to play the Kraken tonight at 10 p.m. The Sabres are really impressive. Craig Anderson at 41 years old keeps winning. Eric Comrie is playing well so far. Rasmus Dahlin, a 5-game goal streak to start the season, which is also a record for a Sabres defenseman at any point in the season. Very impressive. A lot of fun. Your thoughts?
Well, I would agree. Very impressive and a lot of fun is a great way to put it, because above from all the wins and the record and the accomplishments that, if they win tonight, it'll be 4 straight road wins to start the season for the first time in 11 years. That's basically the duration of the playoff drought almost. We saw this last year a little bit, especially toward the end, but what you're definitely seeing, regardless of how many wins and how many points they end up with at the end, this is going to be an exciting team to watch, a team that the fans can be interested in and proud to be a fan of, not staying away from the team as they did at various points in the last couple seasons, and that it's going to be a competitive team that's in it to compete for a playoff spot all season long, whether they actually make it or not. That a lot of players are coming into their own, the youngest lineup in the league, but they're playing with confidence, and they seem like, if they're not the fully realized versions of themselves, a lot of these players are getting very close to that. All of that said, if you dive a little deep into the numbers, they're number 1 in the league in shooting percentage. They're number 2 in the league in save percentage. Probably both of those numbers are unsustainable. If you look at some of the analytical numbers, the Corsi percentage and things like that, they're not near the top of the league. So there probably is a little bit of a coming back to earth moment coming for this team. It could happen tonight. They could be a little bit road weary in the 4th game of the trip. It could happen when they start playing some of these tougher teams in the Eastern Conference or the Atlantic Division. And it could be a situation where the Sabres are really good this year and approach maybe 100 points and still miss the playoffs because of how good the East is and how good their division is. And maybe if some injuries or some lull in the play occurs later on, at this point, they have the best per game goal differential in the league. I don't know how much longer they're going to be the best team in the NHL, but as long as it lasts, Sabres fans can enjoy the ride, especially the ones staying up late to watch these after dark games.
Yeah, they're scoring a lot. 5 goals against Ottawa, 3 against Florida, 4 against Edmonton, 6 against Calgary, 5 against Vancouver. It'll be interesting to see how the crowd looks for these upcoming home games. Montreal coming up next, and the Canadiens fans always come down, and the border's open with no restrictions. So you can probably expect to see a lot of Canadiens fans in attendance for that. But how close do you think we are? And I'm not saying it's going to happen on a regular basis, but how close do you think we are if this keeps up to seeing a full house at some point?
I mean, that remains to be seen. I don't think that they sold all of the season ticket packages, and I think that has a lot to do with the attendance factors, not just actual season ticket holders going to the games, but people that bought tickets to turn around and sell them on the secondary market. It seems like those numbers are lower this year than they were pre-pandemic. But playing a team like Montreal with Canadian fans that'll travel over the border to watch their own team will probably juice the house a little bit. And it'll be interesting to see if the Sabres come in.
Opponents, just let me lay it out here so that way people can maybe you got Montreal on let me get sense here of where we are, of what days are what dates. Montreal on Thursday, Chicago Blackhawks on Saturday,
Patrick Kane.
Detroit Red Wings on Monday, and then the Pittsburgh Penguins on that following Wednesday. So you have 3 original 6 teams and the Pittsburgh Penguins. You have some star power. You have Sidney Crosby, Patrick Kane, the hometown kid, all that type of stuff. Could do well at the box office. And
4 opponents that should draw some of their own fans. But it'll be interesting to see, even if it's not a full house, but maybe compared to what it was for that second game against Florida, and just the buzz in general, if the Sabres being on this winning streak and being hot near the top of the standings, and Rasmus Dahlin being the NHL's first star for the week, does that just lead to an increase in fan interest and ticket sales? And then I'd ask you, where do you think we are at this point in the old notion that the Sabres season really doesn't begin until the Bills season ends? And how much is Bills mania affecting?
Yeah, there's that. You're right. There's some of that. I think that the fact that these games are taking place during the Bills bye week is helpful, because normally these West Coast games get lost, totally lost. And the fact that they're playing well, if the Bills had a game this past Sunday, then I think the Sabres are even more buried by the avalanche of Bills news and euphoria. But the fact that it's been a week off from Bills football has allowed people to kind of, digest what the Sabres have been able to do. Maybe you're not staying up late to watch the games, but it's given the Sabres a lot of time on local sports talk radio, and just able to learn what these guys are doing. I think that if the Bills are playing, does anybody know that Alex Tuck has a career high goal streak going right now? Maybe not. I mean, they may think, well, Tuck's playing well, but they don't know the statistics that are pretty cool going around with these guys. They've won their first 3 road games for the first time in a decade. I think that helps, but you're right. People won't truly embrace or fully embrace whatever the Sabres are doing until the Bills run is over, for sure.
And if this season has a different or opposite trajectory of last season, where the Sabres are really good and really hot for the first couple months while the Bills are playing, and maybe don't finish as well when people turn their attention, how will that change the feelings around the franchise and the expectations? Because I think the Sabres are getting pretty close to where if they keep winning games, then the expectations are that they're going to have a winning season and make the playoffs. And if they stumble and don't make the playoffs, how much fan angst will there be by this playoff drought extending, where coming into the season, a lot of people didn't expect that it would be broken this year?
So also during the Bills bye week, a huge game at the University of Buffalo. Toledo comes to town, and UB with a dramatic come from behind victory. What did the Bills being on the bye week mean to the gate out in Amherst?
It didn't seem to mean much. I mean, it should have. It was believed that it would help, especially on a good weather day, a Bills bye week. The Sabres were on the road. There was no really other major event going on other than Jurassic World down at the arena that could have drawn fan interest away. And the announced crowd was 14,000 something. That was the paid attendance. The actual crowd was somewhat less than that. And this was the most anticipated home.
When you say somewhat
game.
less, it's hard to guess in that place because it's so spread out. But
also, where
half
we
of
sit in
that
the press box, it's a little hard to see certain sections on our side. But my guess would be half of that, if not. It was a very light crowd for the stakes of the game, the quality.
The weather was nice.
As good as UB had been, how much they were promoting the game with the throwback logo on the helmets and things like that. It was expected not to be a full crowd, not a sellout, but to be a bigger crowd than it would be if a lot of those circumstances weren't in play. A bigger crowd than you'd expect on an average UB weekend. And it kind of seemed like an average crowd. It wasn't, the student turnout was there, but it wasn't as large as I've seen in other games. So I think it was a disappointing crowd in the sense that I think UB was hoping to get a bigger crowd. And it was disappointing just from the local sports standpoint of what is it going to take for local fans to get interested in this UB team. And I tweeted it out, and I got a lot of responses about the stadium and the game experience and even the cost of tickets not being
I think
good.
also not getting off to a 0-3 start.
Well, but they were on a 4-game winning streak, and this now is their fifth win in a row.
Yeah, but you know
if
how it
anybody's
is.
paying attention to that.
What your first impressions are is that, yeah, we'll keep checking in on UB to see if they dig themselves out of this hole. But first impressions were pretty negative for 3 games. And I think fans, even if whether you're an alum, a diehard or whatever, I think there was probably a tendency to give up on them.
I suppose there could have been fans that went to that first game against Holy Cross and there was a loss and they sort of wrote off coming back to a game. But, and it's a challenge. I know that people that work at UB and have worked at UB over the years in the ticket promotion office and in the athletic department have tried a lot of different ways to get fans to attend games, and it hasn't always worked. It does seem to be a difficult situation, and I don't know what the answer is there. But from a on-field product standpoint, they couldn't have had a better opportunity this week. And the weather and the Bills not being in competition, I was expecting a bigger crowd. There was a lot of hype and anticipation for the game, but that didn't seem to translate. It was an easy drive into the stadium. It was an easy drive out of the stadium. It just didn't seem like a big event in the way that I thought maybe it would have been.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. What's the outlook, though, for UB the rest of the way with their strength of schedule and being on this 4-game win streak?
Well, it's looking really good for them. They only have MAC game remaining, and they're undefeated in the MAC, and they beat what many would think at this point was the best team in the MAC. So now UB appears to be the front runners in the MAC. I don't know if that means they're going to run the table and win every game. And they go to Ohio next Tuesday in a midweek matching game where the home teams tend to have a bit of an advantage in those wild and woolly, anything can happen type scenarios. And if UB loses that game, they'll be behind Ohio in the MAC East standings without the tiebreaker. So as good as this season has gone, one loss could shift the trajectory a little bit. But it really does look like UB is going to win 2 or 3 at least of the remaining games and have a winning record and be bowl eligible. And maybe they lose this game to Ohio, but I think they're in a very good position to win the division and go to the MAC championship game. And people were tweeting at me, or I was seeing conversations when they were 0-3 that UB had hired the wrong coach and maybe needed to make a change with Mo Linguist. Now we're hearing a lot more chatter about how long it is before he gets moved on to another job. And it's kind of interesting how that conversation can change in a matter of 4 or 5 weeks. But I think there's validity to that if UB does run the table, if they do get to 9-10 wins and a bowl game, I think you're going to hear Maurice Linguist's name at least mentioned as a rising coaching candidate for other schools.
All right, Jonah, anything else you think we should get to before we wrap this up?
No, unless you want to dive into the delinquent behavior, traffic hazards of people putting signs up on Hurdle Avenue and changing the street signs. I don't know how you feel about that.
Not one of your favorite pastimes?
Well, I just think it's not the best way to express your fandom.
Well, on the scale of going out to the airport after a regular season loss to smashing through tables, if that's the scale, where does it fall? Is it in between? Is it where?
Well, it's certainly less than that, but it falls into the same category, I would say. My problem is not what people do.
Is it similar to a butt chug?
It's probably less than a butt chug, but the point isn't what individual fans, the decisions they make, especially when they're drunk. It's the way we encourage it in this belief that now Bills fandom is an excuse to break the law. And that's what was said about this Hurdle Avenue thing, even though it does violate traffic laws, public laws but it's okay because it's all in the name of Bills fandom.
Bills.
Yeah, which I think is ridiculous.
Well, it's maybe similar to getting pulled over for speeding and saying I'm on my way to the game, maybe, or maybe you get off or a ticket because you're wearing a Bills jersey or something.
Does that work?
I don't know. I would never tell a police officer that I'm on my way to the game to work, and then it turns into a conversation about being a journalist, and then I get 4 tickets.
I think it depends on what type of journalist you are. I know police reporters that can get out of tickets with their silver tongues.
Well, Jonah, it's been a good chat. We'll come back later in the week, hopefully with a discussion with athletic Sabres reporter Matthew Fairburn. Thanks to everyone for listening to Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants.